How's it going, everybody? Yours truly here again. Wanted to do one more video for today on the three religious. Let's see. Um, the historical fact about the three horns, um, the three religious powers. In the book of Daniel, it says the religious power before which three fell. We have seen which three kings, a king represents a kingdom. We have seen in the scriptures which three kings that were subdued and absorbed, per se. The definitions of those words does not say anywhere of subdue or fell. It does not say uproot or destroy or anything that was brought out by Ellen G. White. Again, she mentioned 3 of those 10 kingdoms that were destroyed, but if y'all have looked it up, which I gave y'all, there are modern day counterparts for those 3, kings, so to speak. So it's a scriptural fact, people. She missed that deliberately, but at the same time, like I was reading to y'all about these other kingdoms that came afterwards, she mentioned them in there, or the other writers mentioned them in there, and it shows that the kings and the kingdom afterwards and who came afterwards. But for some reason or another, they just couldn't put them to those 3 actual kingdoms: the Babylonian kingdom, the Egyptian, and the Babylonian, the Medo-Persians, and the Greeks. That's what it was. I can't even remember. But anyways, so one came, then the other, then the other, then the other. But obviously, she and the rest of the people failed to deliberately miss that point. Okay. So again, this is going with what we have to do in the scriptures, proving those things, searching those things to see if they're in the scriptures. Like I stated, those 3 nations or kingdoms are not even mentioned in the Bible. Okay, it's that simple. It's like I told you about the Trinity. It's not in the scriptures. It's like I told you about microchips supposedly being the mark of the beast. It's not in there. Okay, just because somebody said, again, just because somebody says they're in there doesn't actually necessarily mean it's in there. Okay, so we must be careful, people, with the things that are being brought to our attention in the terms of teachings. Okay. All right. Let me just check these real quick. Turn the volume down. And let me continue more here on this booklet that talks about the mother worship, Isis, Mithras, and what was it? It was the Great Mother, Isis, and Mithraism. Okay, all these, like I've shown y'all, were embedded into the Christian faith, Christian Catholic faith. Christian. When I use Christian, I mean, I'm trying to make my points, but Christianity, in its sense, its entirety. Anybody and everybody that goes to a church, anybody and everybody that believes in Jesus Christ is a Christian. Though you might be from the Mormon church, though you might be from the Catholic church or another sect of the Catholic church, a Protestant, a Methodist, a Baptist, a Mormon, a Pentecostal, whatever your Christian faith you might have, you are a Christian. Okay, so I'll cover a bit more on this mother, Isis, Mithraism, whatever. Okay, from the same booklet here. Continuing to read on pages 307 of the Outline of History, we then find Where there were distinct differences, the difficulty was met by saying that these were different aspects of the same God. Baal Marduk, we talked about Marduk in the two Babylons, however, was now a very decadent god indeed, who hardly survived as a pseudonym. Asur, Dagon, the fish god, and the like poor old gods of fallen nations had long since passed out of memory and did not come into the amalgamation. Osiris, a god popular with the Egyptian commonalty, was already identified with Apis, the sacred bull in the temple of Memphis, and somewhat confused with Ammon. Under the name of Serapis, he became the great god of Hellenic Alexandria. He was Jupiter Serapis. The Egyptian cow goddess Hathor or Isis was also represented now in human guise as the wife of Osiris, to whom she bore the infant Horus, who grew up to be Osiris again. These bold statements sound strange, no doubt, to a modern mind, but these identifications and mixing up of one god with another are very illustrative of the struggle the quickening human intelligence was making to cling still to religion and its emotional bonds and fellowship, while making its gods more reasonable and universal. This reminds me of a prophecy in the book of Revelation. Somewhat speaks of the same, how Rome, let's see if I can even remember. Well, this is more like in the trading of export and import, but it's in Revelation 18, the fall of Babylon. Anyways, okay. So, anyways, here we have what I have been talking about for in a couple of videos. It says this fusing of one God with another is called theocracia, Theocrasia, and nowhere was it more vigorously going on than Alexandria, Egypt, as well as the whole syncretism, more or less, they go together. One of the most profound conventions of Ptolemy the First to eventually affect the Christian religion was that of the Serapeum, where the worship of a trinity of gods took place. This trinity worship represented the result of the process of theocracia, the fusing of one god with another of the gods of Babylon, Egypt, and Greece. From the outline of history, pages 307 and 8, we find this information. This trinity consisted of the god Serapis, which is Osiris plus Apis. Makes sense, huh? The goddess Isis or Hathor, the cow moon goddess, and the child god Horus. In one way or another, almost every other god was identified with one or other of these three aspects of the one god. Even the sun god Mithras of the Persians. And they were each other, they were three, but they were also one. And now for the first time, we find the idea of immortality becoming the central idea of a religion that extended beyond Egypt. Neither the early Aryans nor the early Semites seem to have troubled very much about immortality. It has affected the Mongolian mind very little, but the continuation of the individual life after death had been from the earliest times an intense preoccupation of the Egyptians. It played now a large part in the worship of Serapis. In the devotional literature of his cult, he is spoken of as the savior and leader of souls, leading souls of the light and receiving them again. It is stated that he raises the dead, he shows forth the longed for light of the sun to those who see, whose holy tombs contain multitudes of sacred books, and again, we never can escape him. He will save us after death. We shall still be the care of his providence. The ceremonial burning of candles and the offering of ex votos, that is to say, of small models of parts of the human body in need of succor, was a part of the worship of the Serapium. Isis attracted many devotees who vowed their lives to her. Her image stood in the temple, crowned as the Queen of Heaven and bearing the infant Horus in her arms. The candles flared and guttered before her, and the ex-wax, ex-votos hung about the shrine. The novice was put through a long and careful preparation. He took vows of celibacy, and when he was initiated, his head was shaved and he was clad in a linen garment. Horus was the only beloved son of Osiris, or Serapis. Y'all see me mouthing the word. I'm wording the Spanish-Mexican word sarape. A sarape is one of those Mexican blankets y'all see in movies, I guess, or if y'all been down to Mexico. Okay. I'm trying to think that maybe that's where this word etymology. Trying to come up with the word is probably not even real. Sarape. Yeah, or a poncho. The term sarape is for the rectangular woven blanket. This is a colorful woolen shawl worn over the shoulders, especially by Mexican men. One of those ponchos. But it is evident to see that this has come from even back then, because the Israelites wore those shawls, I guess, as well. Horus was the only beloved son of Osiris. He was also the sun god, and the scarabus with wings extended was his symbol. And in an eclipse, when the solar corona appears, it has a strong resemblance to the extended wings of Scarabaeus. Horus was the son of righteousness, sun as S-U-N, of righteousness with healing in his wings. Finally, he ascended to the Father and became one with the Father. In the older Egyptian religion, he was the intercessor with the Father for sinners, and he is depicted in the Book of the Dead, which was buried with everyone who could afford a copy. Pleading for the deceased. Many of the hymns to Horus are singularly like Christian hymns in their spirit and phraseology. That beautiful hymn, Son of my soul, thou Savior dear, was once sung in Egypt to Horus. In this worship of Serapis, which spread very widely throughout the civilized world in the 3rd and 2nd centuries BC, we see the most remarkable anticipations of usages and forms of expression that were destined to dominate the European world throughout the Christian era. The essential idea of the living spirit of Christianity was, as we shall presently show, a new thing in the history of the mind and will of man. But the garments of ritual and symbol and formula that Christianity has worn, and still in many countries wears to this day, were certainly woven in the cult and temples of Jupiter Serapis and Isis that spread now from Alexandria throughout the civilized world in the age of Theocracia in the 2nd and 1st centuries before Christ. Hope you guys and gals are finally seeing these things come together. Oh, excuse me, I just woke up from my nap, and medication is very strong. As we have just read for ourselves, this combining of gods and goddesses spread throughout the civilized world in the age of Theocracia in the 2nd and 1st centuries before the Messiah. Okay? This same Theocracia will continue until these 3 religious powers, the worship of the Great Mother, Babylon, the worship of Isis, Egypt, and the worship of Mithras, Persia, would be absorbed into one religious power known as the Roman Catholic Church. I'm going to Crazy, huh? Continuing to read from the Outline of History, Volume 2, pages 431 through 433, we find this information available about Christianity in the first 2 centuries after Yeshua Messiah. Much of the history of the Christians in the first 2 centuries of the Christian era is very obscure. They spread far and wide throughout the world, but we know very little of their ideas or their ceremonies and methods during that time. As yet, they had no settled creeds, and there can be little doubt that there were wide local variations in their beliefs and disciplines during this formless period. But whatever their local differences, everywhere they seem to have carried much of the spirit of Christ, and though everywhere they aroused bitter enmity and active counter-propaganda, the very charges made against them witness to the general goodness of their lives. During this indefinite time, a considerable amount of a sort of theocracia seems to have gone on between the Christian cult and the almost equally popular and widely diffused Mithriatic cult. And the cult of the Serapis, Isis, Horus. From the former, it would seem the Christians adopted Sunday as their chief day of worship instead of the Jewish Sabbath. The abundant use of candles in religious ceremonies, the legend of the adoration by the shepherds, and probably also those ideas and phrases so distinctive of certain sects to this day about being washed in the blood of Christ and of Christ being a blood sacrifice. For we have to remember that a death by crucifixion is hardly a more bloody death than hanging. To speak of Christ shedding his blood for mankind is really a most inaccurate expression. Even when we remember that he was scourged, that he wore a crown of thorns, and that his side was pierced by a spear, we are still far from a fountain filled with blood. But Mithraism centered upon some now forgotten mysteries about Mithra sacrificing a sacred and benevolent bull. All the Mithriatic shrines seem to have contained a figure of Mithras killing this bull, which bleeds copiously from a wound in its side, and from this blood a new life sprang. I know I gave you my interpretation of it. The Mithras votary actually bathed in the blood of the sacred bull and was born again thereby. At his initiation, he went beneath a scaffolding on which the bull was killed, and the blood ran down on him. Here we seem to be dealing with the survival of the primitive blood sacrifice at seed time, which was perhaps the primary religious idea of the earliest temple civilizations. Like I stated, I think past couple of videos, we see how there have been all these people formulating their way, but at the same time taking from different people their ideas, their traditions, their cultures. Exactly what I said in the last video about, per se, when Yahweh told Moshe to tell the children of Israel, when you cross into the land of Canaan, do not inquire or ask about how they worship their gods. But that's exactly what they were doing. Okay, so this theocracia, this combining of people's ideas and religious thoughts and just whatever they could get their hands on, became so rampant in the world that it became the norm. That's crazy. The contributions of the Alexandrian cult to Christian thought and practices were even more considerable. In the personality of Horus, who was at once the son of Serapis and identical with Serapis, it was natural for the Christians to find an illuminating analog in their struggles with the Pauline mysteries. From that to the identification of Mary with Isis, and her elevation to a rank quasi-divine in spite of the saying of Christ about his mother and his brothers that we have already quoted, was also a very natural step. Natural, too, was it for Christianity to adopt almost insensibly the practical methods of popular religions of the time. Its priests took on the head shaving and the characteristic garments of the Egyptian priests, because that sort of thing seemed to be the right way of distinguishing a priest. One accretion followed another almost insensibly. The originally revolutionary teaching was buried under these customary acquisitions. We have already tried to imagine Gautama Buddha returning to Tibet and his amazement at the worship of his own image of Lhasa. We will but suggest the parallel amazement of some earnest Nazarene who had known and followed his dusty and travel-worn master through the dry sunlight of Galilee, restored suddenly to this world and visiting, let us say, a mass in St. Peter's at Rome, at learning that the consecrated wafer upon the altar was none other than his crucified teacher. Well, the Eucharist in the Catholic Church, I don't know if they give them in the Christian churches, but the wafer, the little wafer, it's got the little cross on there. That is taught to the Catholics that is the body of Christ. So it might as well be God in the wafer. Religion in the world community is not many things but one thing, and it was inevitable that all the living religious faiths in the world at that time, and all the philosophy and religious thought that came into contact with Christianity should come to an account with Christianity and exchange phrases and ideas. That's kind of like what I saw in the Feds. There were several, mine for the 8.5 years that I was there, had my class for 7 years. And that's exactly what I saw, was all these Christians that were already there taking in the newcomers that were bribed with commissary so they could join their Christian group. But I heard them day in and day out in my dorm, and they were just shooting ideas at each other and teaching things that were not even in the scriptures. One of the guys that was there crossed with the 39 or 40 lashes of Christ with 39 or 40 something about the body, and I'm like, and by that time I had already caught on to what the scriptures were trying to teach, and I'm like, where are these guys getting that stuff from? That's crazy. But obviously this is still going on today. The hopes of the early Nazarenes had identified Jesus with the Christ. The brilliant mind of Paul had surrounded his career with mystical significance. Christ had called men and women to a giant undertaking, to the renunciation of self, to the new birth into the kingdom of love. The line of least resistance for the flagging convert was to intellectualize himself away from this plain doctrine, this stark proposition, into complicated theories and ceremonies that would leave his essential self alone. How much easier is it to sprinkle oneself with blood than to purge oneself from malice and competition, to eat bread and drink wine and pretend one had absorbed divinity, to give candles rather than the heart, to shave the head and retain the scheming privacy of the brain inside it. The world was full of such evasive philosophy and theological stuff in the opening centuries of the Christian era. It is not for us here to enlarge upon the distinctive features of Neoplatonism, Gnosticism. Y'all know what that is. Stay away from it. Stay away from all this stuff. Philonism and the like teachings which abounded in the Alexandrian world. But it was all one world with that in which the early Christians were living. The writings of such men as Origen, Plotinus, and Augustine witness to the inevitable give and take of the time. Origen, Plotinus, and Augustine were known as the Church Fathers, who were of course Catholic Church Fathers, who promoted the Orthodox line in this institution. I think I'm gonna cover more of that stuff in these next videos. Okay, like I said, if y'all had questions or comments, if you want me to read more out of the two Babylons, by all means, put in the comment section below. Okay, I'll read a little bit more here. See how much I can get out of this. Okay, but anyways, we got more on the Christian keeping Sunday. All right, the Encyclopedia Dictionary of Religion, Meager, O'Brien, and Ahern, the Sisters of St. Joseph of Philadelphia, Corpus Publications, Washington, D.C., volume A through E, pages 1179, gives us this information about the Eleusinian mysteries, which also tells us that it is sanctuary was not destroyed until 395 of the Common Era. The Eleusinian Mysteries, the Attic rites of Eleusis, famed religious rites of antiquity, enacted annually in the agricultural community, was the myth of Demeter and Kor, or Persephone, the descendant of Pluto who stole the daughter away to his dark kingdom, and the triumph of the mother's love that assured Kor's periodic return. Culminating point was the Hierophants holding up an ear of wheat, fruit of the union of heaven and earth. The agricultural theme stirred the people's religious sense deeply. Not until the early 7th century BC did the cult become a mystery. The decisive change was in representation of the rites as a priceless secret. The seasonal worship was adopted into the Athenian state religion, but the rite was still under care of the ancient families. Eumolpides and Kerikes, save for the Hierophant or priest designated by Athens. Preliminary rites were held then in Athens, with the September Boedromian ritual, and continued at Eleusis. By the 3rd century BC, the rites were refashioned and refused with the Egyptian mysteries spread widely. Sprightly, put those words together. Hellenes of classical times recognized the symbolic mystic value. Aristotle thought it not so much a matter of learning something as of experiencing the rites. Aristophanes indicates, as does Andocides, the moral impression made of many. Prevailing was the conviction that Mistai, Mistai, who joined in the rites would have a more pleasant hereafter, as indicated in the so-called Homeric hymn to Demeter. J.G. Fraser, in his Golden Bough, aroused Christian interest. L. Boyer denies that the rites foreshadowed the Christ event, but holds that they prepared for Christianity by causing men to realize that salvation eludes the old solutions. Clement of Alexandria and Protrepticus records the formula for the rite in which, when a pagan, he may have participated. Emperor Theodosius the Great forbade celebration of the mysteries, and Alaric I destroyed their sanctuary, 395. Please read this carefully. It was not until the year 395 of this same common era that the sanctuary of the Eleusinian mystery religion was destroyed. What this also means is pagan religion and Christian religion were functioning side by side in the Roman world at this time, and each of these religions were functioning outside the religion known as Yahweh's law and Yahweh's prophets. Obviously, in all those writings, I mean, nothing is mentioned of keeping the law of Moses. The reader is asked to review chapter 1 of this article, The Faith Once Delivered in Pagan Encroachment, to understand that it was a pagan Roman emperor, Constantine the Great, who presided over the Council of Nicaea, in the year 325 of this common era, who helped to formulate Christian doctrine. However, you will also find in this chapter that Constantine was the only person who was venerated as a pagan god and also as a Christian saint, whose decree at Nicaea plainly stated, "Let us have nothing to do with the hostile rabble of the Jews." And therein Christianity was established, and the blatant path of paganism from God-worshipping antiquity, having nothing to do with the laws of Yahweh, laws which Yeshua Messiah and the 12 apostles obeyed and taught completely. So ask yourself, people, are you being taught the religious antiquities, or are you being taught the laws of Moses and the prophecies? I know where I'm at, and I know where to stay away from. Matter of fact, I seen this guy earlier on another guy that I have on my Facebook comments, and I really hope he doesn't try to contact me, because he's a self-proclaimed preacher. In other words, he's the meme priest. But whatever, I mean, there's a bunch of people that come out of prison as priests, self-proclaimed priests. I know a lot of people want to say, well, how do you know God didn't? Well, God probably called them out, but not Yahweh. Okay. So anyways, So it's very clear to see people being brought up in these Eleusinian mysteries and all these old doctrines from, man-made doctrines from people who wanted nothing to do with Yahweh, who were all brought up in this Nimrod rebellious system, have done nothing but try to teach or try to hunt others and teach them these same things that, well, nobody really knows how to pronounce Yahweh's name and Yeshua's name, and those laws were only for the Jews. So what were they teaching you then? If they weren't teaching you to keep Yahweh's laws, like it says in Matthew 5:17-21, 22, if they're breaking and teaching you to break, they will be called least in the kingdom. But if they do and teach others to do so, then they will be called great. 1 John 3:7-8, let no man deceive you. He who practices righteousness is righteous, just as he is righteous. Everybody who sins is from the devil. Sin is a transgression of the law. But I said, people, these things are in your Bible. I mean, it's okay to pick up these things and find out where those doctrines were coming from. Okay? But as I stated, a lot of people just don't want to do any kind of reading or research. So I tell people, y'all might have taken a semester or two, or however long it took for you to take theology, but it only proves that you know of theology. You might know a thing or two about the scriptures or scriptural history, but it's going to be kind of hard to get somebody like me who's been at these studies for about 14, 15 years to go the other way. And that's why it says that even I'm not saying I'm the elect, but the believers, I'm among the believers, it's going to be very hard for you to even try to get me out of my scriptural truth belief. Okay, so anyways, we'll keep reading here in the paths of Christianity. All these things we have been reading might as well go along with the falling away, or what's called the great apostasy, the great falling away. There were even people of Yahweh that eventually were given in, have been giving in by fear, that they rebelled. I mean, we have proof of the disciples of Yeshua that even turned against them because they were scared. Like we were reading one time in the Feds in our study group. My friend Juan, old man Juan, he told one of the other brothers in the class that since we were in prison and everybody used this homie, carnal, brother, his homies took off on him. But anyways, I just thought that was kind of funny. All right. So we have, it is said by the authoritative scholars that the religions of the Babylonians, Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans are dead. These are just the authoritative scholars. But the one way you can always find out who is if you do some of this reading and you find or you see, like the Messiah said, you will know them by their fruits, by their actions. That the so-called divinities of these ancient religions do not have a single worshiper. But the historical facts prove these statements to be completely false. Absolutely and completely false. The most cherished doctrines and rituals of the religions of ancient Babylon, Egypt, Greece, and Rome are being taught in and being practiced by the religion called Christianity today. The little wafer, the Eucharist, the Trinity. Here's my... we had a guy in our study group, a brother, and when you're locked up, you have to put in a request to have your religious faith changed so you can get a room. And in this case, we got the cafeteria, the chow hall for study time. And when he went, he asked the chaplain, Mr. Clark, I think that was his name. He asked the guy, Daniel was his name. He said, you know what he told me? I was like, what? I was intrigued. I wanted to find out. He said, he asked me if I believe in the Trinity, and I said, why? Or no, he says, why? He says, you have an egg, and then you have the egg white, and then you have the yolk. There are three, but one. And I was like, I said, you should have asked him to show you that in the Bible. I mean, do you see the ridiculousness, people, of the teachings of That's not even an analogy. Well, it might be an analogy in the Trinity, but not in the scriptures. That is stupid. That's ridiculous. Ah, yeah. Oh, hell. I just thought that was hilarious. I'm like, oh, man, this guy. But anyways. So, yes, a lot of this stuff is still being taught in the churches today. A lot of it, if not all of it, in one way, shape, form, or another. The contribution that ancient pagan religion has played in the development of Christian doctrine is clearly defined within a category called the mystery religions. The mystery religions were secret cults of the ancient world which aimed at securing the salvation of an individual after death through ceremonies which were intended for or understood by only a chosen few. That is, by those who were initiated into these same cults. The principal mystery religions of the Greco-Roman world may be divided under three different headings. Native Greek worship of the grain goddess Demeter. Y'all know who Demeter is, just another female pagan goddess in that country called Demeter. But in other countries, she's known as Mary, or the Queen of Heaven, or Isis, or Venus, or Aphrodite, or Athena, Maria, Madonna, all the same thing. Two, importations of mystery religions from Babylon, Egypt, and Persia. And three, mysteries created in historical times to resemble the others. There you go. Each of the primary mystery religions centered around a mother goddess and her companion, and each of these myths pertaining to this god worship. I said that earlier, or in the last video. I said anything that's got to do with Mary or feminine god worship is worship of Lucifer. The companion of the mother goddess is involved in some disaster, but out of each disaster there is a resurrection or return of the lost companion. As a matter of fact, I marked a video on my phone earlier on YouTube about the resurrection of somebody or the coming back of somebody. Must be the Anakim, huh? Or the Anunnaki, whatever you guys call them. I'm not saying you guys directly, but whoever calls those winged bulls that I've shown you on these booklets, they're not aliens. Despite their variations in particular details, the outward meaning is the portrayal of the changes of the seasons of the year. The fertility goddess granted fruits of the earth to men while her companion is present, but withholding them when he or she is absent. Like Easter, in other words, what it's saying here is the goddess of fertility. It was said that in ancient days, farmers rolled eggs across their fields to ensure fertility. Since those who were initiated into the mysteries bound themselves by oath never to reveal them, our knowledge is rather limited, coming from works of art, from casual references in pagan authors, and from sometimes biased early Christian writers. However, from these sources we find the hidden meaning of these myths was that of the union of heaven and earth, in which the hope of everlasting life was offered to the ancient pagan man. Volumes have been written about the Babylonian great mother Semiramis and her husband, son Nimrod, Ninus, about Assyrian Astarte and Adonis, about Egyptian Isis and her partner Osiris Horus, about Grecian Demeter and her daughter Persephone, and about the Roman Ceres and her daughter Proserpina. The fact is, these volumes have not only been written, they have been proclaimed throughout the public schools of this land, nearly classified under the heading cute stories or myths. What is simply not told to these innocent children is the fact that the worship of these same pagan gods and goddesses were accepted lock, stock, and barrel into the religion today called Christianity, and that the pagan laws and customs associated with their worship were absorbed into the Christian religion almost en masse. From the prestigious Reader's Digest Association, Pleasantville, New York, in their book Strange Stories, Amazing Facts, 1980, page 283, tells us emphatically, although Christianity has swept the world in a relatively short time as the histories of great religions go, the early missionaries faced an uphill task that pagans were reluctant to give up their false gods and ancient practices. Might see that today once people start seeing these kind of videos about the worship of pagan gods. Oh, nah, that's not true. I mean, I don't see the danger in Oli. It's not, we're doing it for the kids. The kids are innocent. They don't know any better. Exactly. So It's real easy to take advantage of somebody when they don't know, right? So the missionaries, unable to convert them easily to an entirely new code of worship, did the next best thing. They took the pagan festivals as they were gradually grafted the observances of the new faith onto these festivals and the rites and customs surrounding them. So instead of calling Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead, it's just called Halloween. Oh, but it's for the kids. It's all right. I mean, if those things aren't real, Oli, then why the harm? Like I said, people, y'all don't have to believe none of this stuff, but you can't sit there and tell me, oh no, Oli, you're wrong. Okay, I'm wrong then. I'm not gonna argue with anybody. I told y'all, and like I told people, if y'all think I'm wrong by showing y'all this, prove me wrong. Especially if you think I'm wrong by showing you things in the scriptures, prove me wrong, but using the scriptures, please. If you can't beat them, then join them. And it looks as though this particular saying originated with these Christian missionaries, of course, to take pagan festivals as they were and graft the pagan rites and customs into the new faith is against every law written in Yahweh's holy scriptures. I told you that in the past couple of videos. This is all against Yahweh worship. It's clear to read what the law says, but it's a lot harder to find in between the lines, so to speak, because those laws speak in volumes. Okay, I've told you about there's more than 10 commandments, but it's just the 613 laws of Yahweh are outlined as 10. But we are told not to worship the Asherah pole, crucifixes, rosaries. These are gods made by the hands of man. Crucifixes, rosaries, that has originated from demon worship. Like I told y'all, Catholics and Christians have rosaries. The Buddhists have rosaries. Muslims have rosaries. What does that tell you? Like I said, you don't see none of that stuff here in my possession. Matter of fact, when I got locked up, that I first started reading the Bible with my cellmate, he told me about those things. And when I got out on pretrial, I went home and threw the crucifix in the trash. That's what it is. Let's see. But these Christian missionaries, under the direction of Constantine the Great, wanted nothing to do with the hostile rabble of the Jews who celebrated the feasts written in Leviticus chapter 23. Again, they're not Jewish feasts. Yahweh says that these are my feasts. Leviticus 23:2. Digressing here, I would invite you to request each of our free booklets that prove that each of the holidays celebrated through Christianity are nothing more but pagan from the roots. These booklets are Halloween, Thanksgiving, True Stories about Christmas, the Women of Valentine's Day, and Easter Remembrance, and Should the House of Yahweh Celebrate Birthdays. I covered some of that stuff on the latter booklet. Each of these customs were absorbed into Christianity and is the foundation of the worship today. Now, these things are for your taking advantage. The research is for taking advantage of. If you ever wanted to be part of the pure faith, the pure, unadulterated word of Yahweh, the house of Yahweh gives you those teachings. Y'all might say, well, man, that's kind of boring. Yeah, but you know what? After 8.5 years in the feds, they seem worthless. I mean, they are worthless to me now. Sure, I've gone just along and, drank a beer or whatever, just be outside, whatever. But like my mom, I told you on one of the last videos about Easter, she asked me to help her hide the eggs. I said, ay, mijo, you can't even do that. I just cooked. I didn't cook for Easter. I just cooked so my nieces and my nephew could eat, and me and my mom and my sister. Now, if that's partaking of it, then I'm guilty, but if not, then whatever, okay? So not only did Christianity become the new paganism because of their pagan rites and customs and grafted into it, but the statues of the pagan gods were also baptized as saints. Weirdos! From Forging Christianity by Joseph Willis, Alfred A. Knopf, Publishing, New York, 1930, pages 41 through 42, tells us about this cleansing of the pagan gods which turned them into Christian saints. That crazy? It's just like the popes canonizing or making saints of other dead popes. That only the alteration made was that the pagan gods were made over into Christian saints. This transference was promoted by the numerous cases in which Christian saints became the successors of local deities, and Christian worship supplanted the ancient local worship. This explains the great number of similarities between gods and saints. Okay, never mind. For the often maintained metamorphosis of gods into saints, no proof is to be found. This immense confession of Christian fraudulency and imposture in conjuring fictitious pagan gods, which, according to Christian faith, were all actual devils. Into, I know I make the stupidest faces, right? And to canonize saints of God and Holy Church is several times repeated by the Catholic Encyclopedia, of which this instance is before me. Quote, it has indeed been said that the saints are the successors of the gods. Instances have been cited of statues of pagan gods baptized and transformed into Christian saints, end quote. I was watching one of those history channels with that guy, Scott something. He goes to different places and, he tries to interpret these symbols that he finds. He's a forensic geologist. Love watching his videos. Very cool. I forgot what I was going to say. But he was going... Oh! We have here... I don't know if y'all know this, but we have the Statue of Liberty, or, that's Artemis, that's Diana, that's the Queen of Heaven, that's Lucifer. They have one over in France, somewhere else. I looked that up last night. I was like, oh, that's crazy. Well, I mean, it makes sense. The French gave it to us, right? But whatever. But it's in front of a church, and they were trying to find out the significance of it. I guess I don't know. Whatever. This truly wonderful psycho-religious, psycho-religious miracle is thereupon wrought. The idolatrous pagan who just before the baptism actually worshipped these statues of the pagan gods immediately afterwards simply venerated or adored these same gods baptized and transformed into the Christian saints. That's crazy. Yes, the Christian missionaries took each of these pagan festivals and veneered them with Christian respectability simply by changing their names. That's exactly what they did to all these pagan rites and traditions and customs. They just veneered them with St. Valentine's Day, very pretty, and Christmas, and the thought about giving presents to everybody. You can give presents to anybody any day of the year. You don't have to wait for a day that the government has set for you. That is why today we have Christmas. There you go. That is why today we have Christmas rather than the Saturnalia or the Saturnalia. Easter rather than the festival of the goddess of the dawn. And Valentine's Day rather than the Lupercalia, the festival of the purification of the mother. But even though the Christian missionaries took the pagan festivals as they were and gradually grafted the observances of the new faith onto these festivals with their rites and customs, they are still abominations in the sight of Yahweh. It doesn't matter what we say, doesn't matter what you say, doesn't matter what that guy behind you says. What matters is what Yahweh says. Okay, plain and simple. Helicopter, probably looking for illegals. Reading from the Interpreter's Dictionary of the Bible, Abingdon Press, Nashville, Tennessee, 1962, page 894. We read these documented facts. I guess this is in sections because this is number 11. The church week and year. The development of the church calendar was a remarkably slow process in Christianity, and equally striking is the fact that so little of the Jewish year finally found a place in the Christian celebrations, where we should have expected a Christian transformation of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Chanukah Purim, or Chanukah Purim. We find only the retention of the Paschal festival. See, people, those words aren't that hard to pronounce for those of you who say, well, we don't speak Hebrew only. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, or Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Chanukah Purim, etc., etc., etc. we find only the retention of the Paschal festival. This is due to the fact that the church year was largely the creation of the Gentile church and the background of such notable days as Christmas, Epiphany, Ember, pagan. It's pagan, not Jewish. We must, however, suppose that the earliest Christians continued to observe the Jewish year and week until the break with the synagogue was complete. Now, don't get this mistaken, people. The early Christians were not called. They were not, or like I said, maybe some of them at one time were of the true faith, but those of the true faith were never called Christians. In fact, that word did not start being used till the New Testament era. Okay, so don't get that confused. Definitely, Christian says, distinct from those of Judaism, the New Testament affords us only one certain example, that of Sunday. But it does not say to keep it holy. Okay. So, I'm going to look up these philosophies in my booklets. I was fixing them earlier, and I got these folders to better take care of my paperwork of all my copies. I said, people, we need to do research. You can't just believe people because they're priests. I will let y'all know if that guy hits me up on Facebook, and I'm gonna be like, look, man, stay away from me, dude. He thinks he knows the truth. He thinks he only knows Christian per se truths per se. Okay, I'm not trying to sound proud or whatever, but I know that if he ever tries contacting me and say, look, man, you just stay over there and keep worshiping your devil, your god devil, because I want nothing to do with it. Okay. I will look more into this book of the two Babylons and see if any more stuff should come out of it. I think with that many, was it like 6 videos of the two Babylons? I think that's a lot. And then with what I just gave you in this video and the last one, to make y'all understand about all these pagan rites and customs and traditions that have been brought down to us through the years. But it is now the time to start drawing lines where fiction and where lie is at, so y'all have any questions or comments? Like I said, if y'all need me to read more out of that book, help you understand something, ask me or say something, and I will try my best to get you those answers. I'll look for it. I really will. If it's something that may not be in there, I think I might know that it's not in there, I will look for it anyways and see where you might have gotten that idea to formulate a question out of it. And whatever else questions y'all might have, leave them in the comment section below. Feel free to like and subscribe. Share with your friends, your loved ones, even your preachers. But it is what it is, people. And obviously already by now we have seen the flaw or the error, the mistake, and the lie that was put out by Ellen G. White deliberately. It was a deliberate lie to deceive people. Again, those 3 kingdoms that she mentions, the Vandals, the Heruli, and the Ostrogoths, are not mentioned in there. The 3 kingdoms that were subdued are mentioned in there as Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece. Okay, those were the 3 which fell before this little horn. Okay, they were subdued, they were taken in with everything that they were practicing, living by, everything. Okay. Again, it's not that I'm picking on her, but can you imagine if I sat down and dissected her books completely? I bet you I'd find a lot more errors, but that's just too much work. That's gonna steer me away too much even from my Bible studies. Okay, but anyways, again, hope this helps. And if you have any questions, ask away, comments, comment section. I'll see you on the next one. Cheerio.